welcome and agenda review, do public comment. And then we are going to look at 3 specific scenarios that we were tasked with putting together for you all, that the team was tasked with putting together for you all. I've seen them, and it's actually, I think, a really helpful guide to really focus in on exactly the teleport types. Greetings, Senator. How are you today?
Thank you. Second late.
No worries. The types of entities that we would be looking to recommend creation of. So we'll break out into breakout groups to do that. We'll come back together for discussion and then wrap up. And then there's been a new agenda add request just to talk anew about the manner in which this committee makes decisions or administers its work using Robert's rules. And so I'm not sure where that is coming from because that just popped up today, but we can pick it up at that time. And with that, maybe I will offer opportunity for our introductions around the room and then on the online, and then we're going to jump in. So Danny, would you like to start, please?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Danny Bowens. I'm with the Clean Water Initiative Program with the state of Vermont.
Hi, Gianna Petito. My pronouns are she, her. I am Deputy Director for the Water Investment Division.
Hi, Wendy Harrison, Senator. I represent the Wyndham District, and I care a lot about stormwater.
Luce Hillman, I'm with the town of Shelburne on the committee.
Shane Geiger, Shelburne Stormwater Superintendent, assisting the MS4 seat.
Maddie Cotter, I'm with the Clean Water Initiative Program. I'm the new Clean Water Funding Supervisor, and today is day 4 on the job. So nice to meet you all.
Hello, I'm Mary Perchlik. I'm also with the Clean Water Initiative Program.
Christine Doherty, I am here representing Green Mountain Water Environment Association.
All right, Neil Kamen, Deputy Commissioner of the department. And Danny, would you like to call the roll online with committee members first?
Yeah, Brian.
Hi, Brian Bannon, Town of Brattleboro, representing towns that may form their own utility.
Lindsay.
I'm Lindsay Delorier with Bolton Valley Resort. I'm on the committee representing private business.
Jenny.
Hello, Jenny Patterson, Lake Champlain Committee representing environmental groups.
And then there is a 261 number. I'm not sure if that's a committee member or not.
Well, it looks like that's Carrie.
Oh,
it is Carrie.
Yeah,
I
why don't you pin Carrie up on the phone?
Oh, how weird.
Hi, everyone. I guess that's me.
Hi, Carrie. Where are you calling out from? It looks like your house, but that phone number is weird.
I know, odd. Hi, Carrie Dolan. I'm on the committee representing small towns.
All right. And then for the non-committee members, start with Harry Shepard.
Hi, Harry Shepard, Stowe Public Works. And Green Mountain
Sarah.
Water Department. Thank you.
Sarah Coleman.
Hi there, Sarah Coleman, Program Manager for the Clean Water Initiative Program, and I am eating a late lunch and then we'll join you all in person soon.
Claire Ireland.
Hi, everyone. Claire Ireland. I'm with the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts and the State Natural Resource Conservation Council.
Colleen Miller.
Hi, everyone. Colleen Miller, Clean Water Initiative Program.
Chris Rottler.
Hi, everyone. I'm with DEC Water Investment Division Watershed Planning Program. I'm the TPM Technical Project Manager for the Clean Water Service Providers.
Emily Shelley.
Hi, Emily Shelley. I'm with the Stormwater Management Program here at the state.
And Zach Blodgett, committee member. We're just doing a round of intros.
It looked like he was on the phone.
Okay.
When he went off camera.
There it is.
Hi, Zach.
Town of Montpelier, City of Montpelier.
Yes. All right. Very good. Are there any comments on the agenda? that anybody would like to make before we start jumping in to the matters at hand?
We should maybe look at Robert's rules if we're going into our breakout groups.
So that was, did you bring that one forward?
I did.
Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Happy to discuss that, give some more context to that. So I brought back the three outlines to the working group at Green Mountain. There was say a little bit seemed a little bit misaligned with maybe some of the places we felt like maybe it was a little bit misaligned with some of the discussions that have been happening around this around the table within the committee. We just would like to, I think there's been some concerns about, making sure that representation really gets through the whole process. And so making sure that we're not 100% convinced consensus is going to get us to our end goal and really get good representation on the study, unfortunately. So we want to revisit that and see maybe where other committee members felt about it. Happy, just wanted to have that discussion. I mean, it could just be ourselves, and if it's just we're isolated in that opinion or that perspective, then then there it is. But I have to represent our membership, so here I am.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you for adding that. Anybody have any issue with that? Jenny, go ahead.
Just to speak to the question, I think it may be worthwhile when we reach the stage of making recommendations to use Robert's rules. It seems to me that we're more at a kind of brainstorming and discussion stage where it might be kind of less, it might slow down the discussion to use it now, but I wouldn't say that we wouldn't use it going forward.
Well, let me just offer that we can have the conversation about it staged up where it's staged up in the agenda around 3:45, just so we can go through the material that's on the agenda now. Just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that new addition and make sure there was no objections to it. Carrie, did you want to add?
Yes, I'm first of all, I want to preface my comment with respect for everyone participating in this. So I wanted to make sure people recognize that I appreciate people taking time out of their workday to participate in this endeavor. It's an important effort to look at how to best address our stormwater liabilities, and more voices to the table is helpful. I do acknowledge, though, some of our committees are really small, and these are committee members participating in the development of the perhaps recommendations, or at least report to the legislature. And as someone who is very familiar with Robert's Rules of Order, it often is employed when you have a large audience and you're debating the details of proposals, whether they be municipal budgets or other initiatives that are impactful to people in a community. And so while I think having order in how we address and move forward within the committee members, what this report will look like, I too wonder whether we are trying to put too much structure on an approach with that may in fact have an impact in our ability to really move forward. The whole value of Robert's Rules of Order is to recognize that, by majority rule, that of committee members or municipal members, that we have the opportunity for minorities to be heard and listened to and respected, but as well as the majority of the voting members or the members of a committee to be able to make a decision and move on. So I just want to flag that as something I'm cautious about at this stage, and yet it shouldn't not necessarily eliminate its application. I just wonder whether we are trying to put too much of a structure over a small committee at this stage.
All right. Thank you, Carrie. So let's, if it's okay, take the opportunity to state your case a little bit on the back end of the agenda, and we can pick that back up. That'd be
not a problem.
Great. All right. So it looks like on the agenda that we would jump into breakout groups right away, but I'm just wondering if there's a table set before that happens.
There's also a public comment moment.
There is.
I don't believe anyone
No one
signed
signed up.
but we can
Okay.
take
Is
a
it-
pause if there's
Sure,
any.
thank you for reminding me that. Good
Sure.
call. Are there, anybody like to make a public comment or not members of the committee?
I'm seeing a comment up there about not getting access to the scenarios in the whiteboard, in the SharePoint. I don't know if that's been responded to.
Yes, I did.
Oh, I see. Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
You get it, but you.
Very good. Ben, is there a table set?
Yes, there is. No, good luck. Go away. Okay, so thank you everyone for your patience. We spent the last month trying to digest what we were hearing from the different work groups and put together in a format that would be digestible some scenarios for you all. And so what we presented ahead, and I'm going to put this in the chat. We have it's called a whiteboard app, and I think the committee members had access and some struggled to have access. So thank you, Christine, for flagging that. And we ended up putting the scenarios in a PDF format in the materials that are also linked in the chat for you all. So to orient you a little bit, we very much approach this a la carte, I think is what Chris liked to call it, or piecemeal, where we tried to take very contrasting ideas and have 3 scenarios that have as contrasting a suite of ideas as possible in terms of fundraising approach, in terms of the permitting, in terms of sort of the role of the entity. Folks who had a chance to look at these models may have picked up on that or may have wondered where did these ideas come from. They are sort of pieced together from some of the conversations in the work groups, and none of these represent DEC's ideal model or scenario. They're really presented to you all as sort of a way to temperature check what are the winning ideas, what are the things that people are resonate with people across these scenarios, and what are things that are not resonating with people across these scenarios. So we shared the scenarios with you and asked for some input on the pros and cons, but then also realized I think people were having technological issues with that. So I think we're going to pivot in terms of our activity today and do a couple things in our breakout groups. The first thing we're going to do is make sure that we capture from committee members and members of the public their thoughts on the pros and cons of all 3 scenarios, and we put them all on the whiteboard so people in each breakout group can see them, and we'll have a DEC staff member sharing screens so you can see them. Then just a minute. And then the next piece of that for each breakout group is to take a scenario and review all the pros and cons from everyone and say, what do we think are for this one scenario? What are the winning 1 or 2 ideas? What are the things that are really resonating with a lot of people, that are really showing up in the pros list? The thing that we really like about this one scenario, and bring that back to the group. And then the third thing we're asking for these workout groups, Christine, you shared a 4th scenario from Gumwea, which we didn't have a chance to sort of map out on this board. But what we're asking the breakout groups to do is to also digest this 4th scenario and pull out of it winning ideas, 1 or 2 winning ideas that really resonate with the work group. And in our whiteboard, there's sort of a section on the right. I don't know if you can should I screen share that?
I can get it up.
Good number of people in it.
A good number of people in it, but I don't know if everybody's in.
And I see Jenny, and I see
great.
arrows flying around.
Arrows flying around. We're talking about this other things to consider. We'd love to capture there from the breakout groups, the winning ideas from scenario 4. No, realizing it's just a little bit less time to digest that one, but want to make sure that those ideas are caught as well. So we don't know how long this will take. And so the the breakout groups might be most of this meeting. What we were envisioning was to come back together and build a scenario based on all the winning ideas and sort of map them together and say, what are the winning ideas we all like? And what does that look like in a model? That might roll forward to a May meeting. We're not sure, but we wanted to at least start with as much time as possible in these groups, reacting and seeing what resonated. So I'll pause there. Christine, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing up scenario 4. Just want to make sure that was included. I think one of the challenges that we were having, myself particularly, but also members of the work group with Green Mountain, was that these scenarios, we often refer back to the big circle, where in the circle is this line? And because that really drives so much of the rest of the development of where we go as far as rules or laws that may have to change, funding, everything else was really based off of that. So it really kind of took some of us back, maybe a little bit by surprise, that all 3 of these options were so broad that they really don't say where they're going to land. And I guess anyway, so that's kind of why one of the main drivers why we really felt there needed to be a 4th scenario that was more specific to where on the circle do we think something would work, so you could actually build that out a little bit more. So wanted to share that.
Great, thank you. And thank you for your work putting together that scenario, and do ask that the work groups take some time to look through that. And that's a reminder, probably buried in the prompt and an attachment for you all. We did articulate sort of some reasoning around the scope of the 3 models that we've put forward, and maybe 2 pieces to emphasize that's probably going to contrast with what Christine you've put forward, is that all 3 of them focus on first developed lands. And so if there's offset opportunities, it's sticking within the developed land side, with the understanding that if we're finding those offset opportunities elsewhere, that will require either an EPA trading regime or reopening the TMDL. And I
would like to address that.
And I know that folks on the committee have different levels of where they would like to approach a solution at, and DEC is presenting these and certainly have a space in the whiteboard and space for dialogue to capture other ideas to expand. We felt that reopening the TMDL or establishing a formal trading regime following EPA's protocols and policies felt sort of beyond the scope of the utility committee. And so that's why those presented within it. And that's certainly, again, these are presented as ideas, and we're, deferring to how the committee reacts to those and preferences when drafting this committee report. And then the other piece to draw your attention to is that all 3 of them try to maximize 3-acre treatment kind of first and then find those offset opportunities. Jenny, I think we were in a subgroup meeting when you were like, tell me more about that pink land, right? Like not the red land, but the pink, and what is that? And so we are still working on that analysis. I have a meeting next week to try and translate it to acres of opportunity by watershed. Right now I have it by lake basin, which is not useful. And thank you. That's how the TMDL is, and Emily, Shelley, and team are helping me with that. But in general, other opportunities on the developed lands landscape may be limited. It's not, it's not an unbounded suite of opportunities there. And so doing what we can to maximize treatment on larger scale sites is what these 3 models assume first. And again, it's the committee's report and committee's modeling. Ultimately, just wanted to provide some reasoning as to what was framed up.
Christine.
Thank you.
Christine, then Jenny.
There was a comment made in an email back to the proposal in scenario 4 about the regional watersheds being able to identify other locations where reductions could be made. I just want to clarify that the intention with that idea, and one of the values of going to a regional watershed-based utility, the intention isn't necessarily to look for reductions in other categories. I think reductions could still be made within the same categories, for example, developed lands. The value of it, though, is that it's within those same watershed. And my reading of the TMDL is that that flexibility is written into the TMDL, and you can make reductions within the same category, developed lands or, stream bank stabilization or whatever it happens to be, and identifying them in other locations, is if they're within the same drainage basin as far as the subcategories that
Right.
the EPA came up with. So the concept is really rooted in that same theory and
Okay,
track.
I misread the scenario
Yeah,
then.
not intended to go to look at natural lands, forested lands or something of that nature. The intention is to still stay within that development to avoid the TMD. I'll read over.
Oh, great.
So
Thanks for
just wanted-
clarifying that.
Yep, thank you.
Just a little bit of additional sort of policy wonkishness on top of that before we pivot to Jenny. When you do that and you go find a site that's, call it sub-jurisdictional, but within developed lands, and you attach it to the required reductions under the waste load allocation, you got to get that on the permit, under a permit, and you take it off consideration from the load allocation side. Not necessarily trading, you're not, but that project area becomes regulatory and is lost as an opportunity to meet the requirement for non-regulatory stormwater. So you could have a situation where a regional stormwater utility and a clean water service provider were looking at this parcel to do some nutrient reduction with different mechanisms to achieve it. And one would catch it as part of the waste load allocation. One would catch it as part of the load allocation, but it can't be caught for both.
Yep, I understand what you're saying, and I guess for my perspective is there, needing to have some flexibility in the approach, because the concern that we're facing right now is the impact that this 3-acre rule is having on the 677 permittees and the cost implications and everything that's going with it. I hear what you're saying, but I'd also don't want to close the door to, if it's non-regulatory, there's a lot more opportunity in non-regulatory areas. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I still think was something that we need that flexibility. I think that was one of the asks, was to create a flexibility. And so in that spirit, I'm trying to keep that there. I do have one question too, before we go on a breakout. And sorry, Jenny, I know you have a question. Have there been 3-acre sites that have been issued permits without making improvements because of the engineering feasibility analysis suggested that they cannot meet the current standards or meet the improvements that are required? Essentially paying an offset, a fee, an offset fee or something like that. Have there been any 3-acre permits that have been issued that would meet that criteria?
Believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Terry is unable to join us today, but I think they have started collecting impact fees.
I see Shane nodding yes, which suggests that the town of Shelburne has either helped residents and or yourself encountered that.
When I bring that up because
there's other sites in Shelburne that I know have, that were FRP sites.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because that's part of the reason why we felt that that needs to be part of the options and the flexibility, because if you have that 3-acre, that Sheldon may not have another opportunity within its political boundaries to get that reduction. So where do they go? Where are they going to get it? Is the state taking the lead on it to get those reductions somewhere else?
You mean once you pay the fees?
Yeah.
Yeah, where?
Well, we're not getting the reductions, and we're not getting the reductions.
Yeah, so the impact fees go into the fund. We kind of covered this in all the testimony stuff, but to answer the question and then go to you, Jenny, the impact fees go into a fund that are available for anybody that's doing a 3-acre project that's going above and beyond to book additional nutrient reductions. But you're right, we're not getting those reductions.
In the same location.
In the same watershed.
It has to be in the same.
Yeah, they're watershed separate accounts.
So it's essentially saying this, it's essentially the same thing that we're proposing here.
In a way, it becomes a revenue source, but it also is, in a way, it's also sort of a punitive thing. If you have a constrained site that you've owned for 30 years and it is what it is, can't do anything about it, but that's a policy conversation. So.
No, I mean, you're looking at me, but I know, I think that's good, actually, when something is both.
Jenny, then Karen.
Yeah, just quickly a point of clarification on scenario 4 before we go into the group. So scenario 4, that's on the last 2 pages of the meeting materials, is that right? Okay, I see you nodding, Diana. And I think just there was some discussion actually after I raised my hand where I think Christine, you were saying that this scenario was not intended to go beyond developed lands. I'm just looking at the funding section. It does seem to be listing other sectors. So I just want to make sure that I understand how it's being proposed.
No, Jenny, I appreciate that opportunity. What I was addressing about the developed lands was, there was part of this was saying that if you're looking at a watershed utility, the watershed-based utility would have more flexibility to be able to find reductions in other parts. Maybe that kind of goes back to the 3-acre conversation I was just having. If there's a 3-acre site within a watershed that can't meet or can't make improvements because of site constraints, then you still have to get those reductions somewhere within that watershed. And when I submitted scenario 4, I got a comment back that suggested that getting reductions in other parts of the watershed might trigger reopening the TMDL. And so I wanted to clarify that if there was, if a site couldn't make the improvements that were needed, such as a 3-acre site, which would be under developed lands, and there would be an opportunity for a single entity to manage that somewhere else. It seems more effective and more streamlined than having to pay a fee to the state. The state then has to go and work with another party. It's a lot of different entities that are working and getting involved. I think it complicates things a lot, and I think that could be simplified. Did I answer your question? Not really.
I'm still not clear on the whether it's intended
It's
to
not
be. It's not. So it sounds like it's intended to be limited by watershed, but not necessarily limited to developed land. So it does raise this question about reopening the TMDL if the entity for whatever reason wants to offset phosphorus reductions across sectors, but within the watershed.
I don't think it would require opening up the TMDL if they're going to get reductions in other sectors. So I think that a regional stormwater utility using maybe like the watershed plan could look at different opportunities such as stream bank stabilization and get credits from a project underneath the reductions that are required for natural lands or stream bank stabilization. At the same time, they could be doing similar work with developed lands. There's different categories that have to have reductions. I don't think any of the utilities that we're proposing right now are restricted only to developed lands. I could be wrong about that. We haven't really gotten that far into it, but no, it was not intended to be specific to just one category of load allocation categories.
Okay. Carrie, and then I want to try and wrap it up so that we can get to discussing the specific scenarios. Go ahead, Carrie.
This weird number is probably messing with her.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I can see you're looking for that mute.
And we can't
I
unmute her
can't
from
unmute
here.
it, no.
You would be looking to the upper right-hand corner. Should be the upper right-hand corner.
Found it. I have too many windows open. And trying to read, there's little sticky notes on that on the whiteboard. I guess I want to just take a bird's eye view of what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think this might help when we think about it. First of all, I really do appreciate the effort that we've done thus far in identifying different scenarios. I think that's really helpful as a framework to illustrate our wrangling over a number of different options in front of us. And so I really appreciate the hard work you've done in trying to organize it into these 4 scenarios. So thank you very much for that. I guess the step back or up I'd like to make is in recognition that what are we trying to accomplish here? We have a dedicated clean water fund, the state, and it's used for a number of ways to either leveraging our federal funding or targeting for the various sectors that all have a responsibility as part of TMDLs or our clean water needs generally. And yet what we've discovered is that is not enough to address our needs statewide. Fundamentally because the way we've structured Act 76, I get all those numbers wrong, but as we structured this approach post TMDL approval, what we've discovered is the effort to establish through that act and through our clean water service providers the mechanism in place to address reasonable assurances, which is part of federal law. Reasonable assurances that we're addressing the known point sources, but we'll have reasonable assurances we will achieve our goals over a period of time because of the load allocation part. But what we've discovered is, as you know, as I kept pushing this button about whether we should be reallocating some of those dollars, I neglected to consider the reasonable assurances to address those load allocations. So in effect, we don't have enough resources statewide to address our water quality challenges, localized flooding issues, and the need to maintain our existing infrastructure. So, and that deals with all related water quality related, whether there be catch basins, culvert sizing, other infrastructure associated with how we're managing the amount of stormwater. And what we've discovered, and maybe this will be helpful when we look at where we have 3 acres, it's immune or it neglects the size of community. The size of community might reflect having more of the 3-acre permit obligations. But what, you know, as the representative of smaller communities, there are 3 acres or larger parking lots, particularly, that have under-managed or not managed their stormwater runoff to a point where they've now have been brought into this whole discussion. And so when you think about that, that's where I'm really interested when you look at what we heard last month, the scenario of a regional utility, but what we've looked at across the country in the idea of a stormwater utility is to recognize that there's no free lunch. We're all living on the landscape. We're all driving on the roads to get to those parking lots, to do our shopping, to do our skiing, to support our businesses. And that is because it resulted in this model of a stormwater utility to provide services to the public. That services to the public has a cost. It means every landowner, every parcel owner, every business is contributing because they're getting a benefit. Contributing to that fee, a monthly fee, will generate a dedicated fund to address the gap, that stormwater gap. And in our case, it's this 3-acre permit. And so when we think about it in those contexts, and we look across some of the scenarios, what we find is some of those scenarios fall short. If you exempt or allow landowners to exempt themselves, or it's a voluntary basis, or you're never going to get people, you know, there's free riders everywhere of people wanting the free ridership of not paying their fair share towards having clean water or the maintenance of the infrastructure that they're driving on or over. And so this is why I'm really interested in that scenario 3, because it kind of gets to this issue of, certainly I've been emphasizing the 3-acre permit, but the fact that we're also seeing flooding and flooding infrastructure was reflecting that some of our infrastructure is undersized. And then we have deferred maintenance issues across every community. So when we start thinking about what scenario, what we want to do is try to address and figure out a couple of things. How do we raise those revenues to support this gap in funding to address, in addition to those water quality stormwater, the localized flooding and the infrastructure needs, while at the same time, think about how do we establish a credit-based system to incentivize those that are generating stormwater to reduce their stormwater output. And so I challenge us to be thinking about what would that scenario look like? And maybe it's borrowing from building on 4 and borrowing from the others, but let's start thinking about what we're trying to achieve, why we're trying to achieve it, and what services we're targeting. Because what's critical, and what we find this in all the literature, is the public engagement and the public trust. And the public needs to trust the system that what you're doing is supporting your businesses, your communities, the vitality of your communities by creating this dedicated fund to address this gap of funding.
Thank you, Carrie. There was a lot there. Appreciate it. How do you want to proceed? Do you want to get into the breakouts? Well, there are now 4 scenarios, not 3. And I hadn't had a chance to read scenario 4 until just now.
We'd like to have scenario 4 because we weren't able to put it on the whiteboard. That's one of the 3 tasks of the group. So first is the pros and cons of the 3 that are there. Second is sort of winning ideas of the one that's there, and then of one of the ones that work group is assigned to. And the third is talking through scenario 4 and taking the winning ideas out of that one and capturing it in the sort of other section we have on the whiteboard. That's like other good ideas or things to capture. So then we have all the winning ideas on the whiteboard that we can co-build a 5th joint scenario on. We were worried about having 4 breakout groups with the number of people and wanted it to keep it to 3 to just keep it more dynamic, but still capture reactions too.
Okay, so do we have, I'm sorry to ask this question, but I didn't put together that we were going to do breakouts.
Oh, sure.
3 games. Do we have somebody ready to drive for each of those 3 breakout rooms?
We sure do. Danny's going to drive 1, I will drive 1, and Mary will drive 1.
Okay.
Thank you, Danny and Mary. We have 3 breakout rooms. We have this room and the existing meeting link for those joining us online. And then upstairs we have 2 rooms, Greenstone and Granite, with 2 different links to join those calls instead. And I thought what we could do is sort of randomly assign to the 3 groups to just spread out committee members, and members of the public can pick whichever group they want to join.
Okay.
Does that work?
Sounds.
Okay. Any final questions before we break out into groups? Danny, do you want to stay here because you're already attached and connected in here? Yeah. And Mary, do you want Greenstone or Granite?
Doesn't matter to me. I'll take Greenstone.
Okay, and I'll take Granite. And then remember,
I don't know. Yeah, I'm the public. Yeah, so let's go around and then.
Okay.
Because I haven't been able to get the whiteboard stuff.
Okay. All right. So maybe we'll do group 1, group 2, group 3, and then Jenny group 1, Brian group 2, Lindsay group 3, Carrie group 1, Zach group 2. Does everyone know their numbers?
And you're
And then
assigning
how do
them.
we get into those breakout rooms?
Pardon me?
How do we actually get in those breakout rooms?
Great question. So in the agenda, we have separate links. Find us in the internet.
I'll pull up one of my million.
So just put it in the chat. If you are breakout group 1, you're staying on this link and you're staying in this room. If you're breakout group 2, you're leaving this link and going to Greenstone link. And if you're scenario group 3, leaving this link, going to the Granite room link that's provided.
All right. So it is 2:45 at this point in time. Perhaps we do 30 minutes of breakout. 45 minutes? How do you feel, Gianna? Because we're a little bit behind schedule. I can set the table for the additional scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, probably until 3:30.
Till 3:30?
I think until 3:30, and we
Okay.
might just move the full group discussion and building of a joint one to the next meeting. So we have time to just debrief and discuss Robert's rules and other things for the last half hour. Does that
All
work?
right. So we will reconvene at 3:30 in this room.
Yes.
And I will be happy to bring people to item number 3, to the Granite.
Granite.
That's you, Mary?
Oh, that's me.
No, that's you.
That's me. Okay. Granite.
Okay. With you.
And so if you are a member of the public, you're welcome to join whichever one you'd like. Hi, everyone. We're going to, sorry to interrupt meeting 1. Are you folks at a place where we've got meeting group 2 and 3 back in the room? Is it okay, Danny, if we sort of move to debrief takeaways? Okay. Thank you all for that. I hope that was an interesting exercise. There was certainly lots of great ideas and I keep calling them workout groups, breakout groups.
We can jump up and
Something
down.
in my psyche is telling me I need to get outside. The breakout groups. So what we're hoping to do, we've only got about 25 minutes left. We thought we would maybe just hear.
To reserve at least time for the.
Yes, we need time for that. And so we weren't really sure how long this would take and how long to get started and to keep going with it, and wanted to create that space. And so we're going to suggest like a broader discussion and deep dive for next time, so we don't just kind of move on. And maybe just today, just a report out from each work group, maybe 1 or 2 winning ideas, and we'll take those and then we'll continue to the discussion at our next meeting if that works for folks, or if there's any concerns about the use of the next 25 minutes versus trying to squeeze into this, all of this discussion and debrief and coming up with an ideal model and all of that. Okay. All right. So with that in mind, work group 1, you were assigned scenario 1 generally, but also we're looking at all of them. And so would love to hear, Danny, if you want to facilitate, like what were some of the key winning ideas from that group?
Yeah, one that was brought up was the idea of a partnership between the utility entity and the municipality, although this could bring some more complications down the road with timing and getting that partnership set up. Another key one was the scope of work that the utility would be helping with, like not just the 3-acre parcels, but also like the private roads or driveways and some of the operations and maintenance items that would help incentivize participation in the utility. Others from scenario 1, things that you'd like to include?
I think we also said that it could be expensive if a town only has 1 3-acre project.
Yes, yeah.
And they have to create a utility in order to tie in, right? So that would be could be pricey. Roses we could find if a site has offsets, we could find possibly another property to put a stormwater feature on, because you're now looking at it regionally more than just town wise.
Yeah, I think the scope one was a big one. Like Danny mentioned it, but if the scope is just limited to 3-acre sites, it's a lot of a burden on especially small municipalities to set that up. But if there's more services provided, that kind of partnership would make sense through a municipality.
And we emphasize the importance of partnership is the amount of education and outreach to municipalities to recognize the value. And that value is, as we mentioned, would identify the water quality liabilities that include 3-acre, but also could be MS4 and other water quality related needs, maintenance of existing infrastructure, and the localized flooding impacts and how to address that. We didn't really talk about the local roads, the private roads, because I just want to flag that. That wasn't necessarily something we were going to embrace, but it does provide the opportunity for that conversation to take place. And then the third thing I wanted to emphasize is that the voluntary nature of scenario 1 would imply that the incentive to be a free rider is great. And the fear that you would not raise enough revenues to meet the obligations that the stormwater utility would be trying to address. So this is one of the main challenges of scenario 1.
Great. Thank you. Work group 2. You both were in it. I don't know who else on the call was. What were some of the winning ideas?
Brian.
Oh, great.
Some of the winning ideas, and feel free to chime in, were mandatory participation, like Carrie was just speaking to, for all the 3-acre sites. Also, so much what Shane was just saying about the scope being limited to just 3-acre sites, like for the scope of the utilities work
was a winning idea.
Would be too limiting. So keeping that broader would be important. There was also, if the limiting up to 3-acre sites is a priority, there was discussion of having that be done within the state's department, sort of building off of the scenario 3 idea of having it be funded through state formula grants, like having a grant program within the state that just takes on 3-acre sites, if that was going to be the if the 3-acre sites were going to be the whole universe of the scope. And then the third idea here is allowing local autonomy, or local choice for the level of service that they want to participate with the regional utility on. So I think that was mostly coming from the scenario 1 discussion, where municipalities can maintain their own utility structure to the degree that they desire to. Do you want to add anything, Christine or Brian or Zach?
Sure, pretty well.
And then all groups reviewed scenario 4. So would love to hear from anyone, popcorn style, the winning ideas from scenario 4.
Do we want to do 3 at all?
Do you want to do 3 first?
Oh, sorry. I was in it, so I
think there was some pretty hard discussion up there in that room.
I was like, everyone heard
Can
that,
you
right?
manage the whiteboard as you move it from scenario, right now it's stuck on scenario 1? Could you move it?
I don't think we're
scenario
screen
2 and 3?
sharing. Are we screen sharing right now?
No, we're not screen sharing now, but I can screen share.
So you might want to do the hers.
Oh, but don't do it or you'll get kicked out. Yeah.
Wait, did you notice that too?
Yeah. Okay, there.
Great.
Well, I'll have to move my cursor. Get it back out of the way again.
Sorry. So some of the winning scenarios or ideas from this one, I think folks liked the requirement of participation as well. Really, this question of opt-in versus opt-out. The similar to the other 2 scenarios, that what was not desirable here was the sole focus on 3-acre. Their more participation lens off. Do like it that all 3-acre sites must participate. But there was quite a bit of discussion on the state funding, or some discussion on the state funding, and the feasibility of that and the amount of money available. Anything else from that group?
I'll offer an observation that I had, which was, I live in Virgins, which is a pretty highly impervious area, and I own a small home there, my wife, and we have impervious surface, which flows directly into the street, directly downstream, unmanaged, into a drop inlet right to the Lauder Creek. And I don't pay anything to anybody to manage my stormwater, and it is fundamentally unmanaged. So I am one of 50,000 property owners in Vermont that's not tied up in 3-acre, and that's not tied up in MRGP, and that's not tied up in MS4, right? I'm just making up that 50,000 number, but there's a lot of parcels out there with a lot of impervious and private driveway. And they are paying into the Clean Water Fund through the revenue mechanisms. And Lindsay had some very articulate points about that, which I'll let her raise. Everyone's paying into the rooms and meals when they go out to dinner. Everyone's paying into the yes sheets if they're not bringing back their cans for nickels. Property transfer tax if there's property transfer, right? But there's a lot of Vermonters that are not necessarily contributing much at all who live in the Lake Champlain Basin, like me, at least through any kind of requirement. So I would offer that all impervious parcel owners in a geography really should be on the hook to assist in the nutrient reductions that are necessary for the 3-acre permittees. And whether that fee funds a formula grant or whether that fee funds a utility to be able to help defray those costs, I think there's a level of equity there that has been unexplored. And that the original money raising ideas through the Act 138 Treasurer's Report didn't really get at.
Great. Jenny, you had your hand up.
Yes, I don't know if this falls under scenario 3 or 4, but one of the things that we talked about within the group and that does tie to scenario 3 is that it's watershed based, which I think makes sense. And we talked about the idea that the opportunities to find other phosphorus reductions within the developed land sector may really vary from watershed to watershed. And that with a watershed-based approach, particularly with the state kind of overseeing the criteria and being the source of the funding, there might be the ability to acknowledge the opportunities and acknowledge that what's cost-effective within one watershed might not be within another watershed. And so there might be some differentials that still kind of met the equity standard if you look at it from a watershed perspective.
Great.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Carrie Dolan?
And the thing that we've also been emphasizing in earlier scenarios, or scenario 1 and certainly scenario 4, is the recognition that the value of a stormwater utility, regional based, how we would define that, is to address what I call the water quality liabilities that may involve 3 acres, the MS4 permit, localized flooding and the associated needs to address and mitigate that, and the aging infrastructure or the need to maintain existing infrastructure. So it's more than just looking at 3 acres. It's really looking at the full breadth of need pertaining to those 3 categories: water quality, aging infrastructure, and localized flooding.
Thank you. And that reminds me, one thing that we talked about quite a bit in work group 3 was the cost of standing up new entities and new fundraising structures and new services, and what of these things are sort of time bound or time critical to phase in? What are things that are creating more bureaucracy than needed? So some of that push pull and really looking for a streamlined solution for cost burden relief.
Can I offer up some thoughts on 4?
Yeah, please. And we've only got a few more minutes, so maybe just like a couple people on 4 and we'll come back to it.
So I love the all-in 4, in the lead-in sort of upfront. I think there's some fundamental political realities that are going to make it really difficult to think about bringing the agricultural sector in, bringing the forestry sector in. And a good example of that is what happened to the St. Albans town stormwater utility, where legislatively they got agriculture exempted from it. So But I really like the structure of 4. Otherwise, sort of like everybody is in, everybody participates, every town participates, every parcel owner with impervious participates. It creates that, that was the idea that made me think of my own house. Where do I see my own house in these scenarios? It was there, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just offer that.
And I will say, I agree to a large extent, just my understanding with, with like the rafts and some of the things and just the way that's structured, that very likely would not be able to be part of it, but, we gotta be inclusive, and that's what came out of the work group, but, it's all there. And but there is also obviously conversation going on, in charges from the EPA, so that there is more oversight on some of those rafts in stormwater treatment practices, because they aren't being permitted, so that's, but I think part of that kind of came up.
Well, there's a bright conversation about permitting agricultural discharges right now.
Yes,
Happening
yes,
inside those walls.
yes, so.
Okay, and I'll also add, if I could,
Go ahead, Carrie.
a few things. First of all, we do appreciate that the non-committee member brought forward this whole scenario, and so it certainly gives us something to evaluate, and so I appreciate that. But I do want to mention and agree with Neil, his comment about the working lands. When you look at what we're trying to do is addressing the gap of resources available to address the MS4 permit, the 3-acre permit, other stormwater liabilities, the maintenance of existing infrastructure, and localized flooding, we really do have to focus on how to best service that gap. We don't want redundancy of what the type of services that are already being provided through our clean water service providers, the regional planning commissions, conservation districts, and watershed groups through practical basin planning. But we need to really focus on how to develop the resources we need to address those gaps. So I agree that whatever additional scenario we have, we would not include the working lands except for the residential component if we set up a structure where we have a category of equivalent residential units, we would apply any type of working land that has a residential unit to that same cost category. Secondly, we did struggle with the concept of regional again. While it's, I think, scientifically justifiable to promote a watershed-based approach, we just still recognize the difficulty of understanding how the political jurisdictions would work. And when we think regional, we thought of different scenarios, one being the sharing of a utility among adjacent communities that have the same sort of liabilities they're trying to address, or county level or watershed level. So we're still struggling with that concept as well. So again, really wanting to focus on that stormwater, water quality liabilities, infrastructure needs, and localized flooding as the priority to address these new revenues, and why we like to have a 4th scenario, but not described or containing that working lands as described in this existing model.
All right. Thanks, Carrie. I want to just recognize what I think I heard you say, that scenario 4 came from someone who wasn't a member of the committee. I understand that came from you, Christine, representing Jumuiya, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So that was definitely born out of Christine's representation. So we thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's tackle the last bit of the agenda in the last few minutes that we've got. Robert's Rules of Order. Okay. What's busted?
Yeah, so I think that, some of the feedback that I keep getting is that maybe it's the conversations that we're having and the ideas we're having are not being carried through and reflected efficiently and effectively. And that's, and I think the concern is that we're going to end up at the end of the day I don't know where people stand in a lot of these topics, right? So who can I engage with outside of this room in a one-on-one basis and try to have more developed conversations with when I don't really understand where anybody stands, right? Not voting and having just continued open discussion doesn't allow any of our members, the Green Mountain members, to identify where any of our committee members stand on these topics. And so how does anybody in the membership or any other public understand, and how do they engage and talk about these things when it's just really, there's nothing clear, there's nothing defined, it's just very theoretical, it's very, and then in the way that it's showing up, like it showed up today in the scenarios, when we walked away last meeting, I thought we were gonna have scenarios that were very much more aligned with the circles. What does the utility look like if it's MS4 is running it? What does the utility look like if it's watershed? What does utility look like if it's state level? Because we keep coming back to this idea of how do we talk about funding? How do we talk about the laws and regulations and statutes that need to change? How do we have those conversations when we don't know what that structure looks like? And I feel like we kept coming back to that conversation and kept coming back to that conversation. And here we are putting ideas out there, but still don't have anything figured out. And that's so that's why so that's why I said, well, maybe Robert's rule might be a way to help address that so that we can actually start getting things a little bit more solidified and understanding where people maybe stand on some of these different ideas so that those conversations can start to be more functional.
Okay. I want to observe that I think the exercise that the team conjured up in order to try and draw clarity around the circles, around like what these look like. Actually, I thought it was really good because it flushed out scenario 4, right? So we thought we had an idea of what different people were thinking as was their goals. It was not captured. And Gianna, we talked, like about the artfulness of those scenarios being so very binary, so as to really focus on the ideas. And yet here came scenario 4, which wasn't in there, and it was good, right? Like, so I think that worked. I don't think using Robert's Rules of Order over the course of a meeting to take a vote on who thought, scenario 1 was a good idea or a bad idea, or scenario 2, in any of the meetings up till now would have helped that at all. I think looking forward, as Senator, you get ready to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have a
Please don't
4:15,
apologize.
but I really do appreciate what you're saying, and I think it's a process question for sure.
Right. We need
It's
a mechanism
yeah.
to memorialize what the sense of the committee is. What I'm hearing you say is we need a mechanism to memorialize people's positions on things. I don't know where they're there yet or not. You offer that because the more we get into this, the more complicated this is. This seemed way more straightforward before we started talking about it. Bringing all your ideas to the table is really, exemplifying the complexity that we're dealing with. And we may ultimately have a report, Gianna was just saying this, ultimately we may have a report that doesn't say, here's the language and this is the model. It may be, here's a model that would accomplish these pluses and minuses. Here's another model that would accomplish these pluses and minuses. And General Assembly, we need a conversation about revenue raising, all in, all out, whatever that is. I'm just focusing on what those would look like based on today's discussion. So, Jenny?
I agree with what's already been said about the idea that it probably wouldn't have been helpful to have Robert's rules for this meeting or prior meetings. I do agree, Christine, that it might be helpful, even if it's not a formal vote, a straw poll, if there could be some issues that could be presented so that there are things that we could rule out. And in particular, in terms of the concentric circles, if there are certain concentric circles that we as a group want to say, okay, let's no longer talk about these, and that's a way of reducing the complexity, and just to maybe have either a straw poll or a vote just on that issue might be helpful in an upcoming meeting. And then we could have scenarios that really explore the opportunities within the area of, if not consensus, at least kind of majority view or commonality.
That sounds like a very productive step at the beginning of the next meeting,
Yeah.
right? Carrie.
Yes, I also think that the report, whatever that looks like, will always have the opportunity for, in an addendum, letters of dissent, letters of support, comments from organizations. And so it obviously any kind of document of that tries to achieve consensus will have compromise contained in there. But there may be there will be an opportunity for others to tack on their own organization or position on the document or the set of recommendations that would be coming out. So I don't think I think we're Vermont, we're too small, we're nimble, we listen to each other. Some of us, like me, talk probably more than others. But I think that I appreciate the call, and I also appreciate Jenny's thought of straw votes to think of how to move on on various elements to as we develop this report.
Yeah. Would that satisfy the?
Yeah, and I think this conversation really kind of gets to the point of me just even, that was the whole point of bringing it up.
Yep.
Here's where I think where we can make improvements. And I agree, Robert's rules are kind of rigid, and I think we could, but I also want to make sure that we have start eliminating things, start moving forward things, understand where people are at. And so that as we're putting product forward and moving on, it's focusing in the direction that we all want to go. And if we're in a minority, if I'm in a minority, I'm in a minority, but at least I know where that is, and it gives me an opportunity to start persuading others.
Let me try and read that back to everybody so we can see some heads nodding from members of the committee as we wrap up here. We've talked about 4 scenarios. We've talked about the bright ideas that come from them, the goods, the bads, the pros, the cons. Can the team assemble? I'm going to look back very quickly at the whiteboard because I need the colors. Can the team assemble what would be kind of like a straw poll representing the fundamental scenario, the pink section on the money, the blue section on the applicability, and take those binaries and get them in a way that we can do exactly what Christine is suggesting?
Yeah, I think
Right?
that's exactly
So that,
where.
okay, the 2 models, the outcome of which the 2 models we're interested in are A and B, and they are regional or town, and they are, state funded or not, and they are everybody's in or they're not.
And today, I feel like we've learned a lot just by having the conversations, but we all seemed like everybody said just focusing on 3 acre if you're a regional entity is not enough, right? That seemed to be something we heard today.
Mhm.
So things like that are, if we heard several comments today that overlap, that it should be good to summarize it and see where we're at.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. That was the same area of where you can hear that consensus building, and that doesn't necessarily have to be at the whole level of the scenario, but what are those values? What are we designing for?
Voluntary versus non-voluntary, that came up a lot today. Those there's a few items that I think we're getting closer to understanding what it means.
Yeah, I think we've been in agreement on a lot of that from the get-go, so.
It took us a while to all get there. That's all.
One last thing, I know we're at the present time. I just wanted to say I did ask Danny to post. There's a treasurer's report from Beth Pierce, Vermont State Treasurer from 2017. It is really awesome. It's a great read. Talks about a lot of things that we're talking about today. So let's not repeat the study that they did, because we seem to be heading in that direction sometimes.
See the person in the upper left?
Oh, yes. Hi.
Carrie, that's you in the upper left on our screen. Might have had a little something to do with drafting that report.
Okay. Well,
a lot of little something to do. That was a huge effort from Carrie.
And it's a great report, and there's a lot of great information in it. And I just don't want to land, and we should take something like that, and we can get something that's actually something here's how you do it if you want to do it. I think we can do that.
All right. Just looking to folks who haven't had as much opportunity to speak. Brian, anything from you? To wrap up? Or Zach or Lindsay?
No, I'm all set for today's meeting.
All right.
Yeah. I
have
agree
one
that we
question.
could get things down though.
What's that, Brian?
I agree that it's time to say A or B.
Yep, very good. Go ahead, Carrie.
I think our next meeting was scheduled in May 14th, I think. Is there any objection to trying to delay that a week? Or any time the following week or two?
That would be great because I can't make it the 14th.
I can't make
We
it.
can
on
send out
14th.
a new scheduling poll, Carrie,
Thank
and
you.
not do that in this.
Thank
call.
you.
Yeah, the 14th
go
is
ahead.
corporate cup, so
Oh. Oh, no, that's cool.
What did you say,
The
Zach?
corporate cup. It's the
corporate-
biggest
Oh, corporate
fundraiser
cup.
in the state of Vermont. It's
We
bigger
said-
than
a lot of
Berkeley.
people will be probably
Really?
there.
Yeah,
So
it's huge. Yeah, no, oh yeah. I have very fond
We
memories of
could
the
have a
corporate cup.
study committee team.
All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yes, second.
Okay, I got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Liz. We are adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, have a great day.
Should take a straw poll of everybody.